All right, I'm continuing my review of The Studio on Apple TV by Seth Rogen. All the episodes. I'm not doing all of them, but just the ones that I find the most interesting. This one I'm talking about casting because I think it's super interesting. And I think it's this show, besides being fun and cinematically shot, I think it's also touching on certain things that are important to talk about. Casting in this one. How crazy it is that we've sort of spun ourselves into the ground culturally with this idea about how we're supposed to represent culture in entertainment and film and stuff. And this idea that you have to have four Mexicans and four Asians and four, you know what I mean? Like this, like there's a formula to it that will not affect the result. Meaning that, like, if you just have a diverse cast of people, that's going to have no effect on in a positive or negative way. I think the point of the episode is to kind of say how silly it is that we just don't. It's silly to constantly think about it in terms of diversity rather than thinking about it in terms of merit and who's right for the part, regardless of who they are or what their background is. You know what I mean? Like if a part is written and it's sort of openness to who could play it, well, who's doing the most interesting take? Who's got the most interesting character? One of the things that I've learned in taking acting classes, it's, by the way, if you haven't done it, it's amazing. I've been doing it for the last year. I've taken like 8 classes. I'm addicted to it. It's so much fun. I got the bug. If you're interested or you're leaning on the fence, I highly suggest it. But I digress. One of the things I learned, though, is that in reading scripts, I'm going through and looking at all the movies and TV shows, and I'm just blown away at the idea that the scripts or screenplays, they don't say much about what a character is other than like through just like the words and maybe a little bit of a description. You have to come up with that. And I know it sounds stupid to say that, but I sort of thought that maybe there would be a hint of like, this guy's kind of like he's nervous all the time, and he's always like saying, oh, like a Costanza character. No, there's nothing there. Whatever you see in the script is something that they invent. And I talked about that in a different episode with Andor, with Saw Gerrera and Forrest Whitaker, how he took that character and just made a voice and made the style and everything. So who's the best at that is my point for casting. Who do you think is going to come up with the most interesting character? And I think that this episode really touches on something important in that regard, which is you've got all these people you're trying to please. How many times has that worked out in the art world where the more people you try to please, the better the art? Like 0 times has that worked out? Like, it's not like Picasso was hanging out a studio, but like, does anybody like this one? How about this one? What do you think of this? Oh, okay, all right. No, he just made stuff. They do adjust, right? Artists, if they're not selling, they might adjust a little bit, or if they notice. In Picasso's case, since I brought him up, apparently in his studio, he would invite people in and he'd have these paintings on the wall, right? And he thought they were his best paintings. And he thought, oh, these are going to be really, popular and people are going to want these. And people were interested, but they were more interested in the scraps and bits that he had on his table and like laying on the floor, I guess. And he couldn't understand it, like he's like, this is junk. Why are you looking at these little sketches and drawings that I do? And then eventually it kind of clicked to him like, oh, that's what they like. And it wasn't so much like that he thought, well, I should do what other people like. It was still him, but I think maybe it gave him some sort of a direction as to, what should I explore? Because as a visual artist, or I would imagine a very successful actor, filmmaker, whatever, you can go down a lot of paths that are the wrong one. Do you know what I mean? Like, and if you've been involved in any of those art forms or any art form, poetry, whatever, I would imagine it's similar. Just because you go down a path doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right one. Although I don't think there are wrong ones to contradict what I just said, but because it's never a waste of time. You're just sort of eliminating an option, so to speak. But you have to be aware of it, is my point. You have to be aware that what you're doing is not quite right. There's a great Seth Godin book called The Dip, where when you first start something, it's like a graph, right? The dip. Like when you first start something, whatever it is, like you want to be a sculptor or you want to make jewelry, you get like this initial rise, right? Because it's fresh, it's new, and people are giving you good feedback. And then it goes downhill, like the sophomore slump. And this is where everybody ends up. Now, the next hill is one that very few people can get up because they aren't willing to adjust, right? So in this book, he talks about this is the dip, and it's the dip that separates the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, or the men from the boys, or the whatever. So if you can find a way out of this, and sometimes you find the way out of it by going, I've been doing this thing for 5 years. It's not working. I didn't want to admit it because I put so much time into this style or technique or whatever. It's not working. I have to find something else. And by being able to recognize that and do it, then you're able to put yourself in a position to start climbing out of the dip once you experiment and find whatever voice or style that's working better for you through, trying different things. I don't remember how this relates to the studio and casting, but something. I lost it. I don't know if I'm going to go back and watch this and be like, oh yeah, that's what it was. Anyway, the episode kind of reminded me of all those things, and the Picasso, and thinking about the way other people do things. So maybe in a way, it's not terrible that we've hit this sort of place in society where we're trying to diversify everything, as long as we recognize that maybe it's not working, And I think this episode kind of encapsulates that idea of like, this is pretty crazy that we're trying to like cater to different things, especially because the people, I think, for me personally, my grandparents their families were from Mexico, and I just want, if I go on a audition, like, I don't want that to be a factor. I just want that they think that I'm good or that I'm right for the part. Do you know what I mean? So I think that this episode kind of encapsulates that, but it's also done funnily, and it's fun, and it's Seth Rogen's great, and all the characters are great. So anyway, casting, very interesting look at something that's been a part of our culture for a while now. I feel like it maybe is kind of faded a little bit. I don't know anything about Hollywood. There seems to be like sort of a behind the scenes like acting thing. There seems to be like kind of like a stillness that's worrying actors and people, like in terms of like there being a lot of roles and stuff. So I don't know if maybe there's some sort of a change that's happening, but in any case, whenever this was written and filmed, it worked. I think it's a great one. Casting, the studio. Let me know what you think below if you've seen it. This is getting towards the end. I don't remember which one this is. I want to say 6 or 7, and there's a couple more that I want to talk about, but this is one of the fun ones.